Today is the 6th June 2026. I'm doing another practice of becoming more comfortable doing videos. This time I want to focus a little bit on especially eye contact, focusing more on the camera. I haven't tried to do that very much, not so, however, I haven't tried to focus on that. I also want to try to just use my hands a little bit and to have them in the camera. Starting a little bit with that, but my main focus is on keeping eye contact in the next practices. And with that, today I want to talk about nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is a very important, it's not just a very important, it's the most important way of communication of us humans. And that is because, well, it's the oldest forms of communications for not just humans, but animals in general. If you don't have a spoken language, every animal communicates with each other at least through nonverbal communication. How is the body language? Where do we look at? Where do we orientate ourselves? What are we doing with our bodies? It's of course very simple and like the most basic way that animals that at least can see or sense each other even communicate. And so nonverbal communication is the most important communication that we have. For me, in my life and in my personal experience in how I express myself, nonverbal communications is very important, but also quite difficult. Why is it very difficult for me? In some ways, nonverbal communications, I am not the most expressive person. I feel emotions extremely deeply and extremely strong, and I'm very sensible or sensitive. Honestly, I don't know which of these two words are the ones to use. But nonetheless, I feel in general emotions very strongly. But in a way, you could say I'm a person who is very sensible, and it means from the range of emotions that exist, I look at a very small range, but I feel that very small range for me personally in a very big one. So like from the absolute scale of what you can potentially feel of emotions, my scale is a very narrow slice of what is feelable, but that's my whole range. And so my range is very condensed, and so I'm very sensitive of changes in a small range of emotions. And that's also in the way how I express myself. Like when even from myself, how I've a lot of times experienced my facial expressions is very tuned down. It's very much that even when I feel like I'm grinning from like ear to ear, and like my face is hurting because I smile that much, and then I look in a mirror and I watch it like what does my smile look like? It's very subtle, like it's the range of expression of how much I move my facial expression, but also just in general how I naturally tend to move and use my body in expression is very limited, because with a big movement comes a lot of emotions, and I don't want to. It's the way that I'm so sensitive that I get kind of, how should I say that, the I don't know how to say that, and looking at the camera while thinking about it makes it a little bit more difficult. I have to practice that, not looking away to form the sentences that I want to say. I am speaking about why my... That's weird. Now I'm completely stopped and completely away and not even thinking. Just take a breath. So I was speaking about that my my facial expressions and general expressions are quite tuned down and are in a way mirroring this tight range of emotions that I feel. So they are very much mirroring the range of emotions that I feel, but they're not mirroring the intensity of emotions that I feel. Like I can have very high intensive emotions, like when it comes to fear, when it comes to pain, when it comes to joy, but my expression is a lot of times very small to that, and small changes that for me are actually quite big changes in my emotions are expressed a lot of times also very much in small changes. So for everyone who wants to read me, and for anyone who lives with me or is around me or is friends, whatever, with me, and who want to know how I'm feeling, what's going on inside of myself, the changes that I have and that I express are a lot smaller than for some people, like not for all. I mean, there are a lot of people who are kind of like myself in that way. But yeah, so that is the one side where it's not necessarily difficult, but where I'm not just that expressive as some people would be, because in a way I'm expressing the small range of emotions that I have, but I experience them very intensely and with a lot of nuance in that small range that I have. The other side where I experience in my life that nonverbal communication is very important is when I speak to someone, especially from my communication. It's very important for me to have the ability to communicate how I feel and what's going on in myself, in a non-verbal way. I very much feel that when it comes to communicating about the telephone or about voice calls, I have not an issue with like voice calls for a person that I know me really well. I do voice calls a lot with my friends, but where I see that is a big issue. I really hate voice calls or just calling someone and speaking over the phone on voice calls when I don't know a person. Like the first time, like if it's like any kind of like cooperation or with like doctors or something where I have to call someone, that's like always very, very bad and horrifying for me and everyone, where it's like the first time that I talk with anyone and I have to do that on the phone. That's not something for me. I really hate that. And there are a lot of things that play into that, but I think a very big part of why I struggle that much with like phone calls, especially at first when someone doesn't know me, is because then I'm forced to only use verbal communication. I'm forced to have a real-time verbal communication with someone, and that again, that means I cannot communicate non-verbally. I cannot, if I'm like afraid or I need time to think or whatever, and or I'm talking about something that's maybe difficult for me to say or to talk about, I can't communicate my stress or my anxiety or that I need to think or that I am I'm anxious or something. I would have to say that. I can't show that through my body language, which I naturally would do, and naturally someone would see, okay, now I have issues talking, or I'm thinking about something, or I'm slowing down, or maybe I feel weird, or something stresses me out. Like in person, if it's just someone can see me, that's very visible and that's very knowable. So I don't have to tell that and to say that, and it's even a little bit difficult, especially with people that I don't know, to just tell them, sorry, give me a second, I'm afraid of something, I'm just stressed out, like, wait, please. That even doing that makes me even more uncomfortable, so I don't want to communicate it. But if I'm not communicating, I'm just being silent, I'm just weird. And well, my fear of rejection and of being judged or negatively getting any kind of negative social pressure for that would kick in and make it even worse. So, but if I would have just a communication with someone, can just see, okay, I have a little bit of a struggle. Maybe slow down or just think about something. To communicate that non-verbally is not just a lot easier. There's a lot less pressure. It's also it just happens. Everyone around me could just see when I'm more uncomfortable, when I maybe need some time, or when I'm stressed, or when I'm feared. I just naturally express that, and people could just naturally see that. So there's no need to actively communicate that. But actively communicating is very different and feels very different and needs a lot more you have to kind of overcome some kind of hesitation and fear to actively communicate that in a verbal way and just say that, like, I'm afraid or I'm stressed. Even necessarily being aware of that and communicating is not always that easy. It's not always the case that when I'm afraid or when I slow down or when I'm anxious, I'm going to struggle to formulate thoughts and communicate verbally effectively, that I actually might be aware that is the case and that I should say that. So that's just a difficulty that I have, especially with like phone calls where the lack of non-verbal communication is like very difficult for me. And at the end, I just want to talk a little bit about where I see myself a little bit developing when it comes to non-verbal communication and where I would like to go. So like for this year now on YouTube, and like this practice that I try to start now, to focus a little bit more on non-verbal communication, on feeling a little bit more comfortable, keeping eye contact, and wanting to experiment a little bit more with it. Like, how can I use it? How does it feel with it? How do it be just... I don't think I'm necessarily that uncomfortable with just having eye contact. I think I've practiced that over the years enough that is on its own just comfortable. But I tend to, like, when I think about it, just my eyes wander, I look around. It's also for me very natural not to, even in conversations, not all the time look at someone. That's very much not a thing for me. I'm not someone who just always looks someone directly in the eyes. Even in that aspect, I'm very much someone who actually looks at the mouth a lot more than the eyes, because I think the whole face of someone is a lot more... it communicates a lot more than eyes. And I think I'm also not the best when it comes to reading eyes. I'm a lot better reading the face. And for me, the mouth is a very important part of someone. When they speak, I like to actually look at the mouths and not necessarily the eyes. I find it somehow quite weird. And not in the sense of weird to look someone in the eyes, but the eyes, they are receivers. And it absolutely makes sense to look someone in the eye to communicate, like, I give you attention. That's like that, but that is like an active part. But I'm most of the time in a reading mode. I like to read people. I like to listen and not talk. And like looking someone in the eye is not a listening. It's not I'm looking at you, reading you. It's I'm saying something, that I give you my attention. That is what eye contact, when you look someone straight in the eye, that's what you're doing. I think it's a lot more an active thing than a reading thing. And I like to be more of a reader and not so much of someone who talks, of someone who's active. I like to watch and read. And so the eyes are for me naturally not parts that I focus that much. So that also makes it a little bit more difficult to just keep eye contact. I think in the last years I got a lot better just with holding eye contact and actually enjoying having eye contact with people. Yeah, with this practice, I would like to be a little bit more aware and a little bit more focused on keeping eye contact, and over the time also work a little bit on my hand expression, my gesturing, and at some later points more how I can use my whole body to communicate in YouTube videos. I will also have to work on my filler words that I use still a lot. I mean, that's very much a big part because I'm not prepared for a lot of these talks, so that's a big part of that. Also something that I started a little bit, that was something that I worked a few months ago in private. So, but that is enough. Let's just end it here. I hope you have a good time and have a nice day.